Receiving her master's in professional counseling from Argosy University of Professional Psychology, Ebony will present a working understanding of depression, generalized anxiety disorder, and adjustment disorder. Additionally, Ebony will provide tips to help the community and the family during this global pandemic. Please place your comments and questions in the chat to be addressed at the end of this presentation. Also, remember to complete the evaluation immediately following this session and receive your certificate. Lastly, contact the eye care office if you have any questions regarding your certificate. I now present Ebony Cristal.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I appreciate you for taking time out of your day to join in and talk about mental health during the pandemic. I understand that this using video conferencing, and this was indicative of kind of we've been going through the last year on how to adjust to the new normal, right? So we're used to going on our day. If you have children, if you have a spouse or mate, going out and doing things and interacting with others. Ever since the global pandemic COVID-19, we all have adjusted to normal. So during this presentation, I'd like to discuss with you what mental illness, what mental health looks like before the pandemic, and what it may look like during the pandemic. So again, thank you for joining me. And again, I like for this interactive. So please feel free to put in questions in the chat. I do have topics by the I have very twisted. So if you want to get on to a question that we want to discuss, please feel free to put your questions in the chat. We can move on to the next slide. Can we move on to the next slide? Can you hear me?
Ms. Christoph, we're having some problem with your audio coming through. Is there a way that you can adjust it from your end?
I think it's on the next slide. Probably, I believe. We'll see it. Okay, let's talk about what is mental illness, the regular, right? So before COVID-19 is the pandemic took over the entire world. Right. To the second slide that what mental illness regular. This is accurate. So we'll get a quick so what mental illness in the regular, right? So for a person to be diagnosed, we call it DSM-5 diagnosis, clinical diagnosis of mental illness. You must be evaluated by a licensed psychiatrist, a clinical social worker, or licensed counselor. And there are common disorders that most people can have experience when it comes to a facility or a center or office to mental illness. And one is anxiety. Anxiety is excessive weight, sleeplessness, fear, irritability, and panic attacks. So we are experiencing some level of anxiety, just to parent, I like to, in the more regular experience stress, experience times where we feel a little bit overwhelmed by our responsibilities. And sometimes they make no choice, right? Sometimes we have this unsettled feeling inside. And
Ms. Kristoff, I hate to interrupt, but
so
I hate to interrupt, but you're still choppy. We can barely hear you.
Oh, you can barely hear me. Okay,
There-
let's see if I can.
Now you're starting to get
a
a
little
lot
closer.
That's much
Good,
better.
good. This one is kind of big, so maybe my voice is. Awesome. Bear with me, guys. Awesome. Thank you, Doctor, for putting that in the chat. So I can adjust. About mental illness in the regular world, right? COVID, for all of the world changed. And most commonly, mental illness is identified diagnoses. Anxiety being one of them. Excessive worry, inability to sleep, insomnia, fear, irritability. I'm here still choppy. Still choppy. I'm not sure if that's on my end or on the other end. What do I push through?
Ms. Kristoff, when you got up and moved forward, we could hear you, but as soon as you sat down and started talking again, then we couldn't hear you anymore.
Just forward.
Okay. So a lot of look at it just everyday society. That's more commonly treated diagnosis: depression, feeling of worthlessness, wholeness, loss of interest in things. So things that once brought pleasure, now you have interest in. You have interest in spending time with family. You can't have bed to go and walk the dog or exercise, all the things that you enjoy. From just you feel
Miss Kristoff, I'm sorry to interrupt you again. You're still you're breaking up still really, really badly.
I'm not sure how is there any way we can fix that? I'm not
So
sure
now
if it's
you're
on
fine.
my end.
Now you're fine. It's just it's a slight delay, but now you're fine.
That's odd. Okay, well I'll try to push through, and if I need to
if
I can start over
back from the beginning, if you don't mind, because no one heard anything that you presented so far. And you sound perfect right now, so let's fingers crossed that it will stay up how it is.
Okay, yeah, if we can go to the first slide. I didn't get through much, so if we can go to the first slide, start at the first slide. Wait till the Okay, so what we're talking about today is the normal.
It went back out
and this is a perfect example, right? Typically, oh my goodness.
I'm noticing that whenever I unmute myself, I know, and you're way over there. So I'm noticing that whenever I unmute myself, we can hear you. So I'm gonna just remain unmuted, and I'm gonna put my headphones down so you don't hear any of my background noise.
Okay, maybe that might work. Awesome. And this is actually a perfect example of what we're talking about today: how to adjust to the new normal. What did mental illness look like before the global pandemic, and what does it look like now? How do environmental factors play a role in what we're experiencing? Typically, we would be doing this in person without all of these technical glitches, right? But now we have the external factor that we have to troubleshoot and work through, that we typically wouldn't have to deal with during much better. That we typically wouldn't have to deal with pre-pandemic, as we like to say. So we can move on to the next slide. What is mental illness in the regular world? So in order to be diagnosed with a mental illness, you must be evaluated by a licensed psychiatrist, psychologist, licensed counselor, or licensed clinical social worker. And the most commonly treated disorders are anxiety, depression, bipolar, and attention deficit disorders. This is what most typically comes into our offices, pre-pandemic, right? So let's talk about what these disorders look like. What are some of the symptoms? So anxiety is excessive worry, sleeplessness. You might hear the terminology insomnia, inability to sleep, fear, overwhelming fear, irritability, panic attacks, feeling like your heart is pounding and racing. You can't breathe. You might pass out. You have this impending doom, like you're going to die. And sometimes there are absolutely no triggers, right? You might I've had patients come in and say they were feeling perfectly fine. They're watching TV, they're resting, they're hanging out, and next thing you know, they feel like the world is closing in on them. So there's no trigger sometimes to anxiety. And then there's just your typical everyday anxiety. Just to be a little transparent, I experienced that just, pre-pandemic on, stress about work, stress about, family, just average stress that may keep you up at night or you may worry about. But again, in order to be clinically diagnosed, it is causing dysfunction in your family, in your home life. It's causing dysfunction at work. It's causing dysfunction in your social groups. So the next one is depression. Jesus Christ. A loss of interest in things, tired, fatigued, trouble concentrating, having an empty feeling inside. A change in appetite. So you may no longer eat, your eating has decreased, or you may increase in eating. Some people eat their feelings away. So to have major depression or a clinical depression, again, it has to impede your everyday function. Anxiety that you and then there's your typical everyday bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder comes to the office quite frequently. One is I'm saying there's a background echo. It's my echo, but I hear it too. I hear background. But abnormally upbeat, jumpy, wired, increased activity, you're going through a period of mania. So you may not sleep for days. You have racing thoughts. And then you cry. And this may last for a week. This may last for days. It may last for 2 weeks, just feeling like you're unstoppable. And then there's a quick and extreme low. Depressed, sad, may experience suicidal thoughts, just feeling really down. So it's these extreme mood swings from high to low. Or you may just experience the depression part, where you just feel sad and lost and hopeless. The next is most common, you've heard of attention deficit. So that's concentrating, unable to focus, can't complete tasks with fullness. Some people experience hyperactivity, impulsive behavior. So these are just, there's a myriad of DSM-5 diagnoses, but this is just the most common that we've seen come into our office, or most clinicians have treated pandemic before the world changed. So we can move on to the next slide. And again, feel free to jump in with questions in the chat. Let's talk about what the world like now. Like during COVID-19. Right. When we first began, and I'm hearing some background noise as well. Okay. I don't hear the background anymore. Guys? About my degree.
Miss Christoph,
And
I'm not sure what happened.
I couldn't hear you. You were breaking up.
Okay, yeah, you were starting to break up again, so I'm not sure what was going on, but you're clear now. So let's just go ahead and keep on trying to push through.
Okay. Keep pushing through. Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. So March 2020, and again, you guys can jump in with your experiences as well, was when I like to say the world stopped. And the first emotion that I can remember feeling was just this uncertainty. What is going to happen? How long is this going to last? How will this affect my child or my family? My parents? It was just worry. And remember, we talked about mental illness and what symptoms look like pre-COVID, right? So, and I think I disclosed to you that I experienced anxiety just in the regular world before COVID. So post or during COVID, it just shot up. Rightfully so, right? Because external factors were now in play. So those who experience mental illness symptoms pre-COVID, we could safely assume that those symptoms will increase during COVID, right? So whatever you were experiencing, be it depression, anxiety, even attention deficit disorders and bipolar disorders, especially if gone untreated, you are now maybe experiencing it twice as bad. And I know that's how I felt. So quickly, I had to go into what I call my tool bag of coping skills in order to combat some of that stress and anxiety I was feeling. But before we go into our tool bag of coping skills, let's talk about what most people during the coronavirus may have experienced. The very first one is trauma, grief, and loss. We go about our day and we are expected to function as we functioned pre-COVID, but with the idea and the experience that most of us, some of us, have either lost someone close to us, or we know someone who's lost someone, or even the trauma of having a family member who had fallen ill. I know for me, I had both my parents contracted coronavirus early on, and thank God they recovered, but there's still trauma there and experience because it was so new. We didn't know what this was going to do to everyone, and we still don't, right? We still don't know how your body's going to react to it. So there's this trauma. There's this, gosh, I almost lost my family, or I did lose my family. So feeling that grief and that loss. And then then that's just that piece, the most apparent piece of grief and loss. Let's talk about the piece that most of us don't even really think about on the day-to-day. The grief and loss of our connections to each other. The grief and loss of, I could no longer just stop by my mama's house for some red beans and rice on a Sunday, right? The grief and loss of our birthday parties, of our backyard barbecues, and our Thanksgiving together, and our Christmas together. The grief and loss of the connection that we once had. So that's the social connectedness piece of it that sometimes go overlooked. And that's a piece that we need to sit with, we need to work with, and we need to process. We can't ignore that. That is very real. There's also the grief and loss, the real tangible grief and loss of financial, right? Financial resources. Some of us have lost our jobs. for those of us who are in a position where we still are able to bring in income, it may have decreased, so we had to adjust our lifestyle, and we'll talk about adjusting to the new normal later. But there's a grief and loss there, right? If you've lost, financial resources because of this. And my sister, she's a social worker, we often joke, and it's not a joke really, it's real. Even after coronavirus is over, I think I'm gonna have PTSD because I'm gonna be afraid to go into public spaces. I don't know what it's gonna look like the first time I get on an airplane. I haven't been on an airplane since the coronavirus. So I don't know what I'm going to feel like or what my emotions are going to be when I walk into an airport. So the idea of trauma is very real. Let's talk about health. Physically, our health. We are hopefully all trying to physically be more healthy, to be able to combat if we become ill, the coronavirus. And for those of us who have gotten sick, our body may not be at the same level as it was previously. So we have our health that we are concerned about. Stress. Of course, we talked about financial resources. And I'm a parent, right? For our parents out there, I think this is a parent group. Teaching our children from home. For those of y'all who's still doing it, blessings. It was hard. Just the stress of trying to work from home as well as homeschool our children, as juggling these two things and multiple other factors. It brought on a whole lot of stress. Adjusting to the new normal. So I would say around June or July, for me personally, and everyone may have their own story. I want you to think about that as I'm telling this story, is when I began to settle in. I began to adjust. Let me tell y'all, I'm learning how to cook new things. I'm learning how to braid. Hey, I'm on YouTube learning how to braid my daughter's hair. I put a hammock in my backyard. So now I'm swinging from the trees. Like, I am now settling into this new lifestyle. I'm having Zoom parties with my friends. We are learning how to adjust to the new normal and begin to look at some of the positives that this life change has brought if you are working towards adjusting in a healthy way. Now, we're talking about mental illness at this point in the new normal. So for those of us who have struggled to adjust, you may find yourself not getting out of bed, not putting on clothes, staying in your pajamas for days and days, not wanting to leave the house, having real trouble settling into the positive things that this new lifestyle has brought to us. So adjustment, and adjustment disorder is a real thing. It is any life change. It could be any life change. It could be from you moving from Chicago to Louisiana. Anything that has caused a huge change in life that's brought about any type of negative emotion, meaning depression, sadness, externally acting out, anger, conduct. So adjustment disorder is a real diagnosis that can be given to someone who is having difficulty adjusting to life changes. Work. And this is what we're experiencing earlier was a perfect example. How do we work in this new world? What does it look like for us, right? So adjusting to, and for those of us who are lucky enough, who are blessed enough to still have a job, let's be honest. A lot of people don't have employment during coronavirus or had to find new employment, had to find new ways to bring in income. So that is another stressor. That is something else that is affected. These are external things that affect our mental health during the pandemic. Family. Whew. I give that pause because I have a sister, as I mentioned, my sister, she has twins who are 10 years old, and I can remember her trying to work full-time, homeschool twins, a boy and a girl, who have very different learning styles, and her husband as well working from home. All of these people in one household, 24/7. And I can remember, her talking to me about how stressed she was about that. And while, you know, spending more time with family can be glorious, when you're stuck in the house with them for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you can't go anywhere, it can become a little claustrophobic. Just dealing with the fact that you know, you're now forced to be in such close quarters with people for longer durations of time. And then there's the idea of the family that you don't get to see. What did it feel like? And I want you to kind of take some time and think about, kind of check in. For those of us who didn't get to experience the Christmas like we did in 2019 and 2018, what emotions did you experience during that time? It's important to check in, right? Thanksgiving, we didn't get to spend with our extended family. What emotions did that bring up? And relationships. Some couples who are partners in a romantic relationship, if you live together, the pandemic may have put stress on your romantic relationship. If you don't live together, not seeing each other as often or possibly never may have put stress. And then finally, the community, right? Not having those close connections that we talked about earlier. Community is so important to our mental health. We don't realize how important it is for us to connect at work, for us to connect in social, you know, parties and festivals and dinners. Those things are important, and they contribute to our mental health. So we can move on to the next slide. How to recognize mental illness in children during the pandemic. So I remember doing a talk with a group of teenage girls. This was about 3 months ago via Zoom. And oh my God, they were so transparent about their emotions and what they were experiencing. It was so inspiring to be able to have these teenage girls just really talk about how they felt and whether or not they felt supported during the pandemic by their parents and the adults around them. So a lot of times we don't, you know, especially, I mean, I'm again, be transparent. Look, I'm trying to put food on the table. I'm trying to, you know, make sure my work life is still in order, which is crazy because we're still trying to function as if we're not going through a global pandemic. Like, we are literally still holding ourselves to the standards of pre-COVID during COVID. At least I was. And so it's sometimes you forget to check in with the children in the house. How are they experiencing this? So some of the signs to look for in your children: anger and irritability. Depression can look so many different ways. We talked about depression, this feeling of sadness, the behavioral symptoms. For some people, you immediately think depression, crying. And yet, thank you for bringing all those symptoms up. Sometimes people are angry and people are irritable. And a lot of times those people get overlooked as depressed because their external behaviors appear to be so aggressive that, oh, they're not depressed, they're just angry and they're just being, you know, snobby or bratty. But that may be a sign of what they're experiencing inside, depression. So if you're noticing that your teenager, your child, pull away from the family, and yes, we all, especially during this time where we're being forced to be together so much in our families, we need our little alone time. But when you're noticing your child is pulling away and they're spending hours and hours and hours locked up in their room, not coming out, for those of you whose children are back in school, mine is back in school, immediately come home, close the door, don't want to talk. Loss of appetite or increased appetite. So they're overeating or they're not eating enough. This is a very, very important one when we're talking about teenagers and especially increased time online. Like, look, again, we all have to figure out new ways to entertain ourselves that's safe. And online time has been one of them. But when you're noticing that your teen is noticeably distressed after getting off of social media or getting off of certain websites, they may be reading things that's increasing their anxiety, increasing their stress, or they may be experiencing cyberbullying or any of those things on their social media pages. So they're constantly checking their social media, and then when they get off, you notice their mood has changed. That may be a sign that that's a factor in contributing to whatever symptoms they're experiencing. And again, we talked about right before coronavirus, those who experience mental illness, it may be exacerbated during coronavirus. So if you have a teen or a child who had depression, anxiety, ADHD, bipolar disorder before coronavirus, you may see some of these symptoms pop back up with a vengeance during coronavirus. So sleeplessness, unable to sleep, insomnia, up all night long, poor grades, no longer care. And again, the poor grades, and I want to talk about that just a little bit more, because I really am an advocate, and I tell people this all the time. Lower your expectations. And I don't even want to say lower your expectations. I want to say have grace with yourself. There is no reason you should be beating yourself up to function on the same level pre-pandemic during the pandemic, right? We are all human. We're not robots. So if your teen's grades have fallen, have some grace in that, okay, this is a huge life change. Things are going to change. We can't expect them to function perfectly like they did pre-corona, including yourself. So poor grades may be an indication if you notice that they don't care anymore, they're like, whatever. But if their grades decrease, that's not necessarily an indication of mental illness. It may be, hey, it's real life. Like life is, you can't expect to function at the same level all the time in every area of your life that you functioned before coronavirus. So, and we'll talk more about grace a little bit later. So let's move on to the next slide. So we talked about mental illness during the pandemic. Let's talk about mental health during the pandemic. So you're noticing all of these symptoms. Maybe you've never experienced them before. And that's a thing too. You may now, and I always say this too, everyone in this world will experience some level of mental illness in their lifetime. Mental illness has no color, no age, no race, no nationality, no religion. It affects everyone. So you may notice symptoms, you will, not may, you will notice symptoms, or maybe you don't notice, but you will experience symptoms of anxiety, depression, grief and loss, inattention, poor concentration, whatever, at some point in your life. It is a human experience to deal with these things. And everyone on this planet will experience some type of symptom of mental illness sometime in their life, even if it's just grief and loss. So given the fact that now we're all in the same experience, maybe manifesting in different ways, but we're all in the same experience of the global pandemic, what coping skills can we use? So there are the internal coping skills of reframing our thinking, positive coping self-talk. And this is something that has to be done intentionally. So when you see yourself saying, ain't no need of me putting on no clothes, I ain't going nowhere. I'm working from home anyway. I'm just gonna no need for me to open up the blinds and let some light in. I'm not going anywhere. Those are thoughts that do not contribute to your mental or physical health. So recognizing those thoughts that do not contribute to your mental and physical health, number one, being aware of it when it happens, and then talking yourself out of it. Okay, I've said that. Now, Ebony, I know good and well that if I leave this house dark, if I never get out of these clothes, I'm gonna feel like crap all day. So let me open up these blinds. Let me change into some clothes that make me feel good and comfortable. Let me do whatever I need to do. Let me talk myself into doing things that contribute to my mental health. So that is an internal coping skill. I have a question. What do we need to do in order, it went away. Can you get it to come back up? How do I get it to come back up?
Get what? It's still showing on our side, ma'am. What went away?
The question went away. Okay, here it
It's
is. What
back
do
on
we
the
need to go? Yeah, and help others going forward as the country reopen, Miss Patricia Dawson. I'd like you to expound, if possible, on what you mean by regain trust. Because what comes to my mind is regain trust in the healthcare system. That, you know, these vaccines are working, that and it's not just, let's be real here, it's not just the pandemic that's going on in the world. It's, you know, the election, whatever your political beliefs are, it's the unrest. All of those things have us feeling a little uneasy and not trusting, feeling good about going back into the world. So what can we do to regain trust and help others as the country reopen? So that goes back to coping self-talk. And what I like, and that is all about perspective. There are only a certain amount of things that we can control in this world. And I like to tell myself, because I struggle with worry, right? I'm a little bit of, and typically people who are control freaks are worry warts. I have to be strategic and intentional about acknowledging what I can control and what I can't control. And I always say that the line between mental health and mental illness is hope. What does that mean? People who suffer from severe mental illness have no hope and no faith that things will get better tomorrow. People who do not suffer from extreme mental illness, who are able to work through whatever symptoms they have some level of hope and faith that possibly tomorrow may be better, right? So when going into the world, there's only a certain amount of things that you can control. Wearing a mask, social distancing. I talked about me getting on the plane for the first time. What does that look like for me? Going into, how do I trust it? I can't. I don't know. But before the pandemic, what did I know? Before the pandemic, did I know for sure if I got on that plane that I was going to get off safely? But I got on it anyway because I had a certain level of faith and hope, right? And that got me on the plane. So I did everything that I can do within my power to make sure I'm safe, meaning I went through the checkpoints. I trusted that the security checked everyone else around me. When I got on the airplane, I listened to the instructions about what would happen if it came down. I buckled my seatbelt, and I did everything that I, Ebony, can control. And then from there, I released and relinquished that anxiety, and I allowed whatever happened to happen. And that's how you're going, the same skills that you employ in your everyday life that you don't even realize you're employing, you need to now intentionally employ them during this pandemic. We don't know. I don't know. I'm in this office right now with my staff. I don't know if I go out into this and talk to my secretary if I'm going to contract coronavirus. All I can do is control what I can. So how we help others is reframing that perspective. Oh my God, worry, anxiety, the worst things are going to happen. Look at those thoughts, acknowledge those thoughts. It's happening. What is the reframe? I only can control what I can control, and the rest I have to have faith and hope will carry me through. The same way you did it pre-pandemic. I hope that long-winded answered your question. Because I was just assuming that's what you meant by trusting and helping others as the world reopens. Another coping skill is utilize counseling and therapy. I have a therapist. I encourage everybody to have a therapist. I'm a therapist with a therapist. Those are coping skills. If you have, those are resources that are available to you. Therapy is important to process the day, to process what you're going through. Words of affirmation and gratitude. My daughter during the pandemic, she's 9, she was like, "Mommy, I think I'm depressed." And I was like, "Oh, I'm loving myself." It's like, "Girl, tell me more. Why do you feel like you're depressed?" I don't get to see my friends. I don't get to see my family. And I was like, you know what? That's all true. But let's also talk about the things that we do have. So we decided to create a grateful box. So we feed it every day. We write down something that we were grateful for that day and we put it in the box. And at the end of the week, we read everything that we're grateful for. So words of affirmation, gratitude is another internal coping skill that can get you through your day. External coping skills, exercise, yoga, meditation, journaling, relaxation techniques, hobbies. I've learned how to make jewelry. YouTube is your best friend. Things that will keep you physically busy, that will release energy, because emotions are they're energy. That's physical. And then your natural support system. I said increase family time, but we are already together all day. But let's make the time we spend together quality time, game time, talking, playing, dancing, those little TikTok videos that we do with our family. Online communities, healthy online communities, joining support groups online. I've joined a Facebook group, Moms Who Love to Organize. And I really love scrolling through that thing. They tell you all different types of ways to organize your Tupperware. Stuff that I've never even thought about before the pandemic. So things like that, faith-based church. If you are a person of faith, if that's something you already rest on, utilizing your faith, you have to be creative and open to new ways of doing it, whether that be streaming church online if you don't feel comfortable going face to face, or FaceTiming your church members, things like that. And then community work. So let's move on to the next slide. And again, the next slide just basically talked about what I talked about earlier. Be kind and gracious to yourself. That is my biggest tip for mental health during the pandemic. This is what I had to tell myself. This is all of our first time going through a global pandemic. No one has done this before. The diseases that happened in 1918, we can't compare that to what's going on right now, what we're experiencing now. So again, expecting yourself to function every single day in every single area of your life the same way you did it before the pandemic is cruelty to yourself. It's cruel, it's unkind, and it's unloving to yourself. And to do it to other people is unkind and unloving. You will have bad days, and that is okay. You will have days where you've forgotten to do this, you didn't do that, you're worried about this, you don't want to go there. And that's okay. You do not have to function 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the exact same level you did before this pandemic. It's unfair to require that of yourself. So be loving. That's the biggest tip I can give during this pandemic for your mental health. Be loving and gracious. Give grace to yourself if you don't do everything perfect. The next quote from Dorothy Day says, "We have all known the loneliness, and we have found that the answer is in community." Don't forget that while we are alone, we are isolating ourselves from each other. And even as we move closer and closer into going back into the regular world, that community is important. And it may look different. Online concerts. For those of you, I love music. Music is everything to me. It really soothes me. So those little Instagram concerts that were happening at the beginning of the pandemic brought legit joy to my day. I would literally get on FaceTime with a few of my girlfriends, and we would listen to the Instagram concerts, the verses is what it's called, between the artists, and we would laugh and sing. And those experiences of community, even though we're not face to face, still can exist during the pandemic. And as you move to the world reopening again, it may never look exactly the same, but be open to adjusting to the new normal. So the next slide. Hope I'm not going over time. I think this is close to the last slide, second to last slide. Self-care tips. Again, speak kind words to yourself daily. And I say that to say we commit acts of violence towards ourselves more than we know. And when I say acts of violence, I think the words we speak to ourselves can often be violent. You didn't do this right. Oh, how could you? You're so stupid. How could you forget that? And you're talking to yourself, right? Oh, I can't believe I gained 16 pounds during this pandemic. It's okay. Whatever happens, happens. It is a part of the process, and be gracious and loving towards yourself. As your body may change, and though for those of us who have gotten sick and our body has changed, it may not, it may be taking some toll on us on how do we function. We may not have the same abilities that we had before we got sick. Be gracious, be kind. It's okay if I don't still have the same lung capacity to run 2 miles. It's okay. And speaking of that, exercise for 20 to 30 minutes daily. And when I say exercise, I can imagine some people's faces. I ain't exercised before this pandemic, chat. But that's important to your mental health. There is scientific evidence that physical activity is physical health, and physical health absolutely increases the likelihood of a healthier emotion, mind, and cognitive abilities. So if that means yoga, if that means walking, taking a 20 to 30 minute walk around the neighborhood, if that means intense exercise, dancing, whatever brings you joy, move your body 20 to 30 minutes a day. Assign a minimum of 30 minutes a day for you. My time, I actually have an hour. You could do more, that's fine. But I do 30 minutes at minimum in the morning and 30 minutes at minimum at night. So before I wake my daughter up, I spend time on my patio with my coffee for me. After I put my daughter to bed, I spend time for me before I go to bed. And I'm not cleaning. I mean, I do clean. But after I finish cleaning the kitchen and mopping the floor, I don't just go right to bed. I take some time for me, whether that be for journaling, for meditation, for listening to music, taking a nice long hot bath, whatever it is that brings you joy, do that for you. And eat healthy. You don't understand how important it is for your body to get good foods. When you constantly put bad foods into your body, that does affect your hormones, your mental stability, your cognitive functioning, all of those things. So healthy eating is an important part of self-care. And I was just talking to a friend, actually a cousin of mine the other day, and we were talking about building offensive joy, where right, left, front, back is something that brings joy to me. Whether it be music in the front of me, whether it be a prayer in the back of me, a beautiful piece of artwork to the right, and yoga to the left. There is something around me every day that brings me joy. And that is something intentional that I do, that I offer to you too. So always have something in your space every moment of the day, whether it be music playing, whether it be artwork that you have in front of you, or inspirational words in your office that puts a smile on your face. That is so important to build offensive joy around you. And I say joy specifically, not happiness. You're not gonna always be happy. But when you have internal joy, no matter what goes on around you in this world, you can always come back to a place of peace. All right, last slide. Supportive resources. So there's Louisiana LSU Health Center in New Orleans, supporting young children isolated during a pandemic. That's an essay or an article, not an essay, an article by Dr. Osofsky that talks about how to support young children during a pandemic. And one other resource, of course, us here at Nia Life Center for Counseling, we offer community counseling. We are doing telehealth services for children and adults, ages beginning at age 5 all the way up to 225-349-8984. At www.nialifecounseling.com, or email us at info@org. More information on how you can get counseling services here with us. We also offer a new program called Nia Soul. And that is a free online beginners and intermediate yoga classes. Our spring schedule will be starting soon, and you can find that spring schedule by visiting us on Instagram at Nia Soul Yoga. It's absolutely free. I'm also a certified yoga instructor, so I've been teaching Zoom yoga classes pretty much since this began, which was also my coping mechanism. And it's geared towards people who've never ever done yoga a day in their life. So it focuses on body awareness, mind-body connection, and meditation. If I have time for questions, I'm willing to answer if the time to do so. All right, no questions? Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for time out with me today. We had a rough start, right? But again, that's life during a pandemic. What is the website for your yoga? Yeah. So if you are interested in absolutely free yoga, if you have Instagram, we don't have a website, but if you have Instagram or Facebook, you can go to at Nia Soul Yoga. That's NIASOULYOGA, Nia Soul Yoga. We are on break right now, but we will be starting our spring schedule very soon. Zoom classes, online. All you need is a mat, some space. Thank you, Caroline. A mat, and you don't even need a mat, just a comfortable floor, some space, and you. No yoga experience necessary. So you can check us out on Instagram for the schedule. Again, thank you for your patience, your grace, in that it may not have gone smoothly at the beginning, but we made it through, and thank you. Facebook is Nia Life. You can go to our Nia Life page, Nia Life Center for Counseling, and our Nia Soul schedule is on Facebook as well. Any other questions? Yes, Nia Life on Facebook, absolutely.
All right, you guys. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
All right, well, thank you guys.
Don't forget to complete the evaluation on the agenda form, and this recording will live here at this link forever and ever. So have a blessed day, you guys.